Hi, I'm Perry Atkinson, General Manager here at theDove. Hey, check out our other videos and check out our website at thedove.us. Welcome back to Focus Today. What a delight to have back with us again Dr. Richard Land. He's the president of the Southern Evangelical Seminary, and he's been with us on several occasions. But today I wanted to have him comment on what we have all watched with great interest. What's going on in Houston, Texas? Even though the mayor has rescinded her subpoenas for the local pastors' sermons, the fallout from this whole event has been very, very significant. If you haven't been following that, what's happened in Houston, Texas, is that the city there passed an ordinance that gender-confused people at the last moment could choose what restroom they wanted to use. And that set off a firestorm. And pastors were preaching against it. And the mayor decided to send out a subpoena asking for pastors to send their sermons in before they preached them for review. Well, that just set off all kinds of a firestorm. In the meantime, the mayor has rescinded that order. But Dr. Land, who is president of the Southern Evangelical Seminary, with us today to help us maybe figure this one out. Dr. Land, good to see you, my friend. How you doing?
I'm doing very well. How about you?
Good, good. Thanks for being with us. I know your time is really precious. Well, what do you think about this whole issue down there in Houston?
Well, first of all, I'm a native Houstonian. I was born and raised in Houston. And, you know, there are some of us who have been saying for a long time that this was coming. This kind of action by government was going to come when so-called same-sex marriage became, more legally embedded. And that this was never about equal rights. It was never about same-sex marriage. It was about religious freedom, and that the governments were going to come after pastors in the pulpit. I didn't think it would happen this soon, and I didn't think it would happen in my hometown of Houston. I thought it'd be Los Angeles or San Francisco or New York. But it happened in Houston, and I'm proud of the response of the pastors. They stood up and said, you know, this is a gross violation of our religious freedom and our freedom of speech, and we're going to fight this, and we're going to fight this vigorously. And they have done so, and the mayor has withdrawn the subpoena for the 5 pastors who were not involved in the lawsuit. But that doesn't solve the situation, because this is a warning sign that this is going to happen increasingly all over the country unless we stand up and vigorously defend our religious freedom rights and our right to freedom of speech and freedom of assembly.
All right, this provokes a lot of questions. Number one, how did it happen in Houston? I mean, that is probably, that's big Bible Belt country down there, and you've got some large churches. How did this happen in Houston?
Well, I'm going to say something to you that surprised me when I found it out, and it's going to surprise you. Houston is the most diverse city in the United States demographically, more diverse ethnically and racially and religiously than New York City is.
Wow.
Houston has grown exponentially during my entire lifetime. When I was born there in 1946, there were about 350,000 people there, and now they're about 3.5 to 4 million. And but it's become a very demographically diverse city. You have a lot of big churches, you have a lot of Christians, but you have a lot of people who aren't Christians. You have a lot of people who are Buddhists and Muslims and Hindus, and you just it's a city that's attached to the Bible Belt, but it's not part of the Bible Belt.
All right, so how does a mayor have this much power where they could actually subpoena sermons before they're preached? Where in the statutes does this come from?
Well, it comes from a lawsuit. I mean, the background is that they passed this ordinance called the HERO Ordinance, and Human Equality Rights something or other, and part of it was what was known as the bathroom bill. And that is that people who are transgendered can decide for themselves unilaterally which restrooms they're going to use. So you can have adult males who are transgendered choosing to use the women's bathroom with 8 and 10-year-old little girls. And the pastors and the Christians in Houston and a lot of others found this to be unacceptable. And so they got a petition drive going, and they got more than enough signatures to have a petition to repeal this that had been passed by the city council. And the city council and the mayor unilaterally just threw out enough signatures to make the petition invalid. So the people who had organized the petition went to court. They sued in court. And so then, as part of a subpoena, as part of the lawsuit, they asked for these communications, and they didn't just ask for sermons. They asked for communications, for phone conversations, for emails. But they didn't just ask for that from the people who were part of the lawsuit. They asked for that from 5 pastors who had been active in the movement, but who were not part of the lawsuit. In other words, they hadn't filed suit. They weren't part of the suit that had been filed against the city. And so it was a massive overreach on the part of the mayor that triggered this whole thing.
Wow. All right. Now, you said earlier that this is a issue of freedom of religion. And where does the First Amendment come in on this?
Well, at the time I asked, where have the mayor's lawyers gone to law school? The University of Beijing? I mean, the First Amendment to the Constitution says Congress shall make no law, the government shall make no law affecting an establishment of religion, nor interfering with the free exercise thereof. A pastor preaching to his people, a pastor in his communications with others concerning his role as a pastor, is part of his freedom of religion, and the government has no right whatsoever to interfere with it.
All right, this has obviously set up a huge debate with a lot of tentacles attached to it, and I don't see this going away. You don't see this going away. How do you think this will end up in Houston first? How do you think it'll end up there?
Well, I think that the lawsuit's going to proceed unless the mayor and the city council change their mind, because I've looked at, from what I've seen, the evidence is clear that they had complied with the regulations, the people who were asking for a referendum on this, and that they have been, this is, we have also in the Constitution the right to peacefully redress the government for redress of grievances.
Right.
And this is being denied. So I think that the pastors and the others who are involved, they understand this. They have felt the cold, suppressive hand of government and the attempt by the gay rights thought police to weaponize government against them. And I think they're going to go on with the lawsuit. I think they're going to one of the lessons is you better pay attention to who you elect to the city council. You better pay attention to who you elect as mayor, because unfortunately, to some degree, through the inattention of Christians in Houston and other people of faith, they have a city council and a mayor who are well to the left, clearly, of where a majority of Houstonians are.
The residual fallout from this, Dr. Land, could fuel the criticisms that Christians are just bigoted. And but on the other hand, it's a fundamental of our doctrinal beliefs of what all of this should be. How are we going to balance this one?
Well, I think anyone who accuses Christians of being bigoted in this situation need to understand who's being persecuted. We're the ones who are being persecuted. Christians are the ones who are being persecuted. We're the ones who are being harassed by government authority. We're the ones who are having the government interfere with our right to freedom of assembly and freedom of speech and freedom of peaceful redress of grievance. We're the victims here. We're the ones who are having our First Amendment guarantees, our rights as citizens, are being challenged and being undermined. And so I would say to people, look, this is, and I think when people understand what the bathroom ordinance is about, I don't think most Americans want adult men to be able to unilaterally self-decide that they want to use the women's bathroom.
Yeah. Let me take
I know as the father of two daughters and the husband of one wife, I don't.
Yeah. Amen to that one. Let me take a quick break. We'll be right back with Dr. Richard Land. He's the president of the Southern Evangelical Seminary. As we're talking about the situation recently there in Houston, we'll be right back. Okay, we're back, and our special guest today is Dr. Richard Land. He's the president of the Southern Evangelical Seminary. By the way, it's a tremendous resource, and if you want more information about the seminary, you can go to ses.edu. And I understand, Dr. Land, before we continue on here, you got a smartphone app.
We do. It's a free downloadable smartphone app, and this is an amazing age we live in.
Yeah.
You can get my daily radio commentary, Bringing Every Thought Captive, and all the previous ones are archived there. Plus, the best of the last 22 years of our annual apologetics conference. We have the speeches and the presentations up there, about 200 of them. It's like carrying around an apologetics Bible or an apologetics library in your pocket.
Oh, it's great. All right. And again, when you go to ses.edu, you may want to check out the smartphone app. All right, back to Houston just for a moment. And I agree with you. The Christians obviously have been persecuted here. It seems to have sparked a interesting pushback. Over the weekend, quite a few pastors around the country went to their pulpits and did something that was in response to all of this. They went as far as endorsing candidates. And they're saying, all right, it's time for the church to push all the way back. We have our freedom of religion and our freedom of the First Amendment. We shouldn't be restricted in any way, shape, or form. What do you think?
Well, I know a lot of those folks. I admire them. I appreciate them. But that particular form of protest puts me in a difficult position. Let me state what my position is.
Okay.
My position is I don't think that it should be the government's business whether a church endorses a candidate. It should have nothing to do with their tax exempt status. That should be a decision made by the congregation and by the pastor. It shouldn't in any way, shape, or form be the government's business. Now, having said that, I don't think that churches should be endorsing candidates. I think we should be looking for candidates who endorse us, who endorse our values, who endorse our beliefs, who endorse our convictions. And I think that I think in terms of what pastors do, that's, they have the right as pastors, as private citizens to endorse. But I don't think that we should be endorsing candidates from the pulpit. We should be talking about moral issues and where the Bible stands on those moral issues. And we should be telling people where the candidates stand on those issues. But I think we have to leave it to the people to decide how they're going to vote. I think that, I guess I'm still burned by my support for Richard Nixon. I had pretty much the same response that Billy Graham had when he heard those tapes of Richard Nixon using vulgar language and profanity. That Richard Nixon was a very different person than he had presented himself to Christians as being. And, I don't want to lend the name of the gospel and the name of Christian officially to any party or any candidate. So while I agree with their goal, which is to get the government out of the business of what churches do in terms of endorsements, since I don't believe we should be endorsing candidates, it would be difficult for me to personally endorse a form of protest that I disagree with.
Boy, that's interesting and very well said, I might add. Thank you for your position on that. All right, tomorrow's Election Day, and Houston is a clear example of what happens when we don't participate. What can you say?
Well, absolutely. And we have, there's an article out now about 5 people that you've never heard of that may decide this election. 5 independent candidates that are running. We've got one here in North Carolina that is running as a third-party candidate, and as you know, the race between Speaker Tillis and Senator Hagan is razor thin, and the difference will almost certainly be less than the vote for this independent candidate. And the independent candidate has no chance of winning. So, I would say to people that unless you're being asked to violate your conscience, for instance, I could not vote for a pro-choice candidate, even if they were the lesser of two evils. But, Bill, with that provision, Bill Buckley always said, I'm going to support the most conservative candidate who can win. You got to win. If you don't win, you don't have anything. And so I would say to people, be sure and vote, and don't make the perfect the enemy of the good. No candidate is perfect. I have seldom met a candidate that I agree with about everything. But there is a clearer and clearer difference with every election cycle between the candidates of the two parties. We are now in a situation unprecedented in American history where the most liberal Republican in the House has a more conservative voting record than the most conservative Democrat. Let me repeat that. The most liberal Republican in the House has a more conservative voting record than the most conservative Democrat. So there's no overlap between the two parties when it comes to issues. You have one party that's very clearly a liberal party, and you have one party that's very clearly the more conservative party. Now, you need to decide as Christians which party candidate is more in alignment with your views, and then you need to vote for that person. That's how you make a difference. That's how you influence the process.
All right. You made a statement earlier that you wouldn't vote for a pro-choice candidate, even though if they were okay on everything else. What do you do when you're faced with that?
First of all, you resolve to try to do what you can through the process to make certain that doesn't happen again. That means getting involved in the local activities of the party that you find more in alignment with your views if you're not already involved. And then you write in, you vote. I think you always vote, but you can, not vote in that race and vote in the other races, or you can write in your own name or somebody else's name. I am, to me, the pro-life issue is a deal killer.
Yeah, I agree with you. Over the weekend, Donald Trump said the biggest enemy to Israel is Barack Obama. He went on to say that Israel's enemies are our enemy, and yet we're treating Israel as an enemy. Your thoughts?
Well, I'm certainly extremely disappointed by President Obama's attitudes and actions and posture toward Israel. It's clearly well to the left of where the American people are. This administration does have a disturbing habit of treating our allies more like our enemies and treating our enemies more like our friends, which is why we have less supportive allies and stronger enemies than we've had in a long time on the international front. I'll tell you a quote I got when I was in Israel from an Israeli intelligence officer who was a colonel who was giving us a private briefing. And he said, George W. Bush was the best president of the United States that Israel has ever had. Barack Obama is the worst president of the United States that Israel has ever had, and we've had difficulty adjusting to the difference. Wow. And I think that's demonstrably a true statement. Now, I don't think he's the greatest enemy of Israel. The greatest enemy of Israel, frankly, is the devil.
Right.
Let's make no mistake about it. Anti-Semitism is satanic.
Yeah, no question about it. All right, Dr. Lamb, kind of wrapping this up. And again, thank you for your time. I know you're really a busy person and your schedule's really tight. Christians still are struggling with whether or not it's worth voting. And some will even say, oh, well, all of this nonsense is God-sponsored because it's playing into the end-time scenario. So why bother? Jesus is coming Friday at 4 o'clock, so what's the use? Your response?
Well, my response is Romans 13. Paul, under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, said that God ordained the civil magistrate, and he ordained the civil magistrate to punish those who do evil and to reward those who do that which is right, and that we have an obligation to support the civil magistrate for conscience sake. That means we obey the laws, we pay our taxes, and in our system, we vote. I think not to vote is a sin. Based on Romans 13, it's a violation of Scripture not to vote.
Wow.
And then I would say, remember those hundreds of thousands of men and women who have died to protect our right to vote, to have government. You know, I've often wondered how Lincoln said the Gettysburg Address. Well, we now have an eyewitness that's been discovered that was a reporter, and he says that this is the way Lincoln ended it. Government of the people, by the people, for the people shall not perish from the earth. So it's our government. We determine how we will be governed, and if we don't vote, we are forfeiting that God-given right that we have to be self-governed.
What would you say to a pastor in closing that won't even mention voting from the pulpit?
I would say he's being derelict in his duties. Now, remember, I've said I don't think he should be telling people who to vote for. But Romans 13, I think, makes it very clear that we're to support the magistrate for conscience sake, and that it is part of our duty as Christians to vote and to be involved. And it's part of being salt and light. Mm-hmm. And Jesus commanded all of us to be salt and light. So I would say that a pastor that won't even mention voting needs to get a backbone implant.
Thank you, Dr. Land. You're an inspiration, my friend. And again, ses.edu. You can go there and check out the seminary and also check out the smartphone app. And it is packed full of good things. And the conference they put on, the apologetics conference they put on, it is a must attend. If you haven't attended, you can go to the smartphone app and pick up a lot of those special speeches. Thanks, my friend. Look forward to having you back soon.
Well, thank you, and appreciate your ministry, and you keep fighting the good fight.
All right, brother. God bless you, pal.